So I made a big mistake. Nothing dangerous, certainly nothing illegal. In fact, the majority of you wouldn't even have noticed I made this mistake, which is precisely why I need to address it. I can't be here on the internet giving you wrong information and you just accept it because, oh well, I guess he must know what he's talking about. Sometimes I get stuff wrong. I'm not infallible, and this is one of those times. You may have noticed earlier in the week, this video went live. If you didn't notice it, don't worry, it didn't perform particularly well, and I pulled it down after about an hour once I recognised my error. This was a video about a power supply from NewX. Not the most sexy of topics, but to try and give it a bit of spice and interest, I opened up the unit to talk about the technology on the inside. After looking at the circuit boards, identifying components, looking up their datasheets, doing some quick internet revision on opto-isolators and PWM controllers, as well as reading up on NewX's own promotion, I ended up making the following claims. When you heard the words Zeus Isolated Power Supply from NewX, you probably thought transformers. And you'd be wrong. This is a switching power supply utilising optical isolation. This pulse width modulated voltage then drives the infrared LED within the optocoupler. Now all of that, of course, is complete bollocks. I just didn't notice it was complete bollocks until about 10 minutes after the video went live and a viewer left this comment. It took me all of about 3 seconds after reading this to realise, fuck, my explanation is nonsense. There's a certain amount of terror that sets in when you realise not only is it nonsense, but it's obvious nonsense. How the hell did I miss this? And now it's live on the internet for everyone to see. There are very smart people who watch my videos who will call me out on this. What am I going to do? So what exactly did I get wrong here? When you heard the words Zeus Isolated Power Supply from NewX, you probably thought transformers. And you'd be wrong. No, Colin, of course there are transformers involved. There are transformers on the back of every AC-DC converter board. That's how the power is getting from one side to the other. It's those transformers that are doing the isolation. Now you might be wondering, Colin, did you not see those transformers? Well, of course I saw those transformers. That's what makes this mistake so stupid. You see, in the NewX instruction manual and on their website, they talk about how they looked at competitor products which used large toroidal transformers. And they decided that that was too heavy, too inefficient, and would get too hot. So they did something else. All of which is true. NewX aren't using a large toroidal mains transformer. They opted instead to make a switching power supply, hence the PWM controllers on the boards. But in my head, I'm going, they're not using transformers, and that's the bit that stuck. I even looked around to see if I could find the circuit diagram for these AC-DC boards to check the circuit because the presence of the transformers made me pause. But I couldn't find anything and decided I was spending too much time down a rabbit hole and I just needed to get the video finished. The irony was that I did have the circuit diagram, or at least something very close to it. By this point, I'd already downloaded the datasheet for the PWM chip, and that document contained an example circuit which is not far off from what these boards are doing. Look, there's the PWM controller, there's the optocoupler halves, and right here is the transformer. I just didn't notice this diagram while making the video. This pulse width modulated voltage then drives the infrared LED within the optocoupler. No, Colin, if you had just looked at the orientation of the optocoupler, you'd have noticed this can't possibly be true. I clearly went, what's bridging the gap of the circuit? Oh, it's the optocoupler, and falsely concluded that it was the component responsible for transferring the power pulses. And I should know enough about LEDs and phototransistors to know that's complete bollocks. The transistor and the LED both need power to function, so how can it possibly be the thing responsible for transferring the power? That's exactly what the comment points out, and if I just had that thought at any time when making this video, I'd have caught this mistake. But I was so absorbed in getting this one turned around and moving on to my next projects, which are also overdue, that it just never occurred to me. Optocouplers don't transmit power. They transmit some kind of signal or information. They essentially act as a switch to control the components across an isolation gap. If you're using PWM, you need to reference the output to keep it regulated. But if your output is electrically isolated from your input, you can't just run a wire across. You need a way to transmit that reference signal in an electrically isolated way, which is what the optocouplers are doing. As you can probably tell, this is a catastrophic error for someone calling themselves Science of Loud to make. I thought about leaving the video up and following it with a correction video, but ultimately I couldn't let it stand. It's a blight on my record, and I've now filmed a new technology section and re-uploaded a fixed version of the video with some more correct science. I still wanted to make this video though because I think it's of paramount importance to be responsible as a content creator for the things I say which are presented as fact. This is supposed to be an educational channel. I've got a fucking physics degree. You're supposed to be able to trust me on this stuff. However, I'm also a human being, burdened by ego, deadlines and laziness. I'm not infallible. I do make mistakes, and the correct process for mistakes of this kind is to retract the erroneous information and issue a correction, which I have now done. In an attempt to go faster, I ended up taking longer. And for what? A power supply video that no one is even going to watch? Well, at least I'm getting paid. And on that note, why don't you support me on Patreon? Maybe with a little more financial backing, I'll be less likely to rush through content and make stupid mistakes like this one. No promises though. Please do leave me a comment telling me how much of a science fraud I am. I absolutely deserve it for this one. Keep it loud, and I guess stay curious.